The junkyard stretched endlessly across the barren landscape of Severick, for a planet known less for its livability and more for the graveyard of outdated technology scattered across its surface. Mountains of rusting starship hulls, twisted engine cores, and shattered cockpit glass shimmered under the twin suns. Among this debris sat Daryl Kane, a human mechanic with grease-streaked hands and a reputation for fixing things that shouldn't work. Daryl wiped sweat from his brow as he leaned over the fractured remains of a sublight engine. He wasn't sure why he even bothered with the endless piles of alien scrap. Maybe it was pride, or perhaps the stubborn human belief that anything broken could be fixed. Ugh, he muttered, tossing the corroded actuator aside. Another dead piece of junk. He stood, stretching his aching back, when a shadow moved across the ground. Daryl squinted upward and saw a hovercraft descending, its sleek design marking it as high-end. The craft landed with a soft hiss, and a tall alien figure stepped out, its translucent purple skin glowing faintly in the sunlight. "Looking for something, Tulek?" Daryl called, recognizing the junkyard's most frequent visitor. Tulek, a merchant of dubious moral standards, grinned with a mouthful of sharp teeth. "Actually, Kane, I've got something for you. A special delivery." Daryl sighed. "Let me guess, another hunk of trash you can't sell?" Tulek gestured to the back of the hovercraft, where a tarp-covered object rested. With a flick of his clawed hand, the tarp slid away, revealing a starship unlike anything Daryl had seen before. The vessel was sleek yet battered, its dark metal hull covered in scorch marks and alien glyphs that seemed to hum faintly with energy. Its design was ancient, the kind of ship that belonged in a museum or a history book. "What is that?" Daryl asked, stepping closer despite himself. "An obsolete prototype," Tulek replied. "Belonged to the Kretos fleet a century ago. They dumped it during the last war, when it became too unreliable. I figured you'd like a challenge." Daryl frowned, running a hand over the ship's hull. "What's the catch?" "No catch. I'm practically giving it to you," Tulek said, his grin widening. "Fix it, scrap it, blow it up, I don't care. Just take it off my hands." Daryl's instincts screamed that there was more to the story, but the ship's allure was undeniable. Its lines were elegant, its design far ahead of its time. "Fine," Daryl said, crossing his arms. "But if this thing explodes and kills me, you owe me the first inspection." Once Tulek had departed, Daryl got to work. The first challenge was towing the ship into his makeshift workshop, a cavernous building cobbled together from salvage. With the help of an ancient loader droid named REX, he managed to haul the starship inside and lower it onto a repair platform. "Well, girl," Daryl muttered, circling the vessel, "let's see what you've got under the hood." The hull bore signs of heavy combat, scorch marks from plasma fire, dents from missile impacts, and sections warped by what looked like a near-miss with a gravity bomb. Despite its condition, the craftsmanship was exquisite. He pried open a panel near the cockpit and was greeted by a tangled mess of wires and circuits. Daryl whistled. "You've got a whole lot of problems, don't you?" Using his scanner, he identified several issues: a fried power core, severed control lines, and a navigation system that looked more like a bird's nest than an advanced computer. But what intrigued him most was the ship's central AI core, a shimmering crystalline sphere embedded deep within the cockpit. "Now, what are you?" he murmured, carefully removing the core and placing it on his workbench. The sphere pulsed faintly, as if alive. As he tinkered with the ship, Daryl discovered that much of its technology was unfamiliar. Alien systems he'd never encountered, even after years of salvaging and repairing alien tech. But there was something else, something that made his skin prickle. The ship seemed aware. Strange beginnings. The first sign came when he attempted to power up the AI core. As soon as he connected a diagnostic cable, the sphere flared to life, emitting a burst of light that made him stumble backward. "What the hell?" Daryl exclaimed, shielding his eyes. A voice echoed in the workshop, soft but commanding. "Designation: Eclipse. Kretos Fleet Prototype Alpha 1. State your purpose." Daryl blinked in shock. "You're still functional?" The sphere's light dimmed slightly, focusing on him. "Functional status: 32%. Primary systems offline. Auxiliary systems operational. Identify yourself. I'm Daryl Kane, he said cautiously. A mechanic. I found you in a junkyard. The AI seemed to process this. This unit was not designed for disposal. Why have I been discarded? Daryl hesitated. I don't know. But you're here now, and you're in pretty bad shape. If you want to stay online, I need to repair you. There was a pause. Then the AI replied, permission granted, a new partnership. Over the next several days, Daryl worked tirelessly to repair the Eclipse. The ship was a marvel of engineering, but its systems were far more advanced than anything he'd encountered before. Each fix was a puzzle, requiring intuition, trial, and error. The AI, however, proved to be both a guide and a challenge. Eclipse was intelligent, far more so than any standard ship AI. It provided technical insights but also questioned Daryl's every move, often critiquing his methods. That connection is suboptimal, Eclipse said as Daryl rewired the control lines. Look, I'm doing the best I can with what I've got, Daryl snapped, wiping sweat from his forehead. Noted, the AI replied. But inefficiency increases the probability of failure. Then maybe you should fix yourself, Daryl muttered, but there was no real anger in his voice. Despite the challenges, he felt a growing sense of camaraderie with the ship. It was strange. He'd always worked alone, relying on his wits and skills. But with Eclipse, he felt like he had a partner. By the end of the week, he had managed to restore partial power to the ship. The engine hummed softly, and the cockpit lights flickered on. She's alive, Daryl said, grinning. For now, Eclipse replied, but there was a hint of warmth in its tone. A warning from the past. As Daryl delved deeper into the ship's systems, he uncovered fragments of its history, data logs, and encrypted files that hinted at its purpose. Eclipse had been designed during the height of the Kretos fleet's power, a prototype vessel meant to revolutionize space combat. But something had gone wrong. One log, partially corrupted, mentioned an experiment that had pushed the ship beyond its limits. Another referenced a catastrophic battle that had left the Eclipse critically damaged. The most troubling fragment, however, was a cryptic message. The Eclipse is not a weapon. It is a warning. What does that mean? Daryl asked the AI. I do not possess complete records, Eclipse replied. But the phrase suggests that this unit's purpose extends beyond combat. Daryl frowned. Well, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. Together, as he stared at the ship, now humming faintly with life, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stumbled onto something far bigger than a broken-down starship. And whatever it was only just beginning. The stars above Severick were sharper that night, glittering like shards of ice. Daryl Kane didn't notice. His attention was locked on the Eclipse as it hummed to life. A faint blue glow illuminated the ship's sleek hull, pulsing like a heartbeat. Power core is stable, Daryl muttered, eyes scanning the readout on his handheld diagnostic pad. Engine capacity at 42%. Not bad, considering you were a pile of scrap last week. Acceptable progress, the AI intoned, its voice a blend of mechanical precision and faint warmth. Recommending recalibration of the plasma conduits to improve efficiency. Daryl sighed, setting down his tools. You know, Eclipse, a little encouragement wouldn't hurt. Encouragement is irrelevant to operational success, the AI replied dryly. He smirked. Maybe, but I'd feel better about working late into the night. Noted. Daryl leaned against the ship, gazing at the faint energy trails flickering along its surface. All right, Eclipse, let's take it up a notch. Let's see if your flight systems are intact. The test flight. Daryl had cleared a wide expanse in the junkyard for the test. The Eclipse, now resembling a half-repaired predator poised to strike, rested on its landing gear. The rebuilt sublight thrusters hummed softly, ready for their first activation in decades. Are you sure this is a good idea? REX, the ancient loader droid, whirred nervously. Not even a little, Daryl replied, strapping himself into the cockpit. The ship's interior was a strange blend of alien minimalism and advanced technology. The controls, sleek and unfamiliar, responded instantly to his touch, translating human inputs into alien commands. Eclipse, Daryl said, gripping the flight stick. "How's your navigation system?" "Functional at 68% capacity," the AI replied. "Sufficient for atmospheric maneuvering but unsuitable for interstellar travel." "Good enough for now. Let's see if you can still fly." With a deep breath, Daryl engaged the engines. The thrusters roared to life. The sound a deep, resonant hum that reverberated through the junkyard. Slowly, the ship lifted off the ground, hovering unsteadily before stabilizing. "You're doing it," Daryl exclaimed. "Correction," Eclipse said. "We're doing it." Daryl laughed, exhilarated as he guided the ship higher. The controls were responsive, almost intuitive. Despite its age, the Eclipse felt like an extension of his own body. But the joy was short-lived. An unwanted audience. As Daryl pushed the ship higher into the atmosphere, a piercing alarm blared through the cockpit. "Proximity alert," Eclipse announced. "Unidentified vessel approaching." "What?" Daryl scanned the skies, spotting a dark shape closing in fast. It was a sleek, angular fighter, modern and deadly. Its hull bore the unmistakable insignia of the Krivax cartel, a notorious group of intergalactic scavengers and pirates. "This is bad," Daryl muttered, yanking the flight stick to the left. The Eclipse rolled smoothly, evading the fighter's first volley of plasma bolts. "Defensive systems offline," Eclipse warned. "Recommend evasive maneuvers." "Gee, you think?" Daryl shot back, pulling into a sharp dive. The pirate ship pursued, firing relentlessly. The Eclipse, though outdated, was agile, weaving through the atmosphere with surprising grace. But without functional weapons or shields, it was only a matter of time before they were cornered. "Eclipse, do we have anything to fight back with?" "Primary weapons are non-operational." However, the AI hesitated. "However, what?" "There is an experimental system embedded in this vessel, a kinetic energy feedback array. It absorbs and redirects incoming energy, but it was deemed too unstable for deployment." "Unstable is better than dead." "Activate it." A deadly surprise. The cockpit's lights dimmed as the experimental system powered up. Outside, a faint shimmer surrounded the ship, creating a glowing barrier. The next plasma bolt struck the barrier and ricocheted back at the pirate ship. The bolt hit its mark, blowing off a wing and sending the fighter spiraling out of control. Daryl whooped. "Eclipse, you beautiful relic." "System stability at 34%, the AI warned. "Extended use may result in catastrophic failure. Let's hope we don't need it again." As the pirate ship crashed into the desert below, Daryl guided the Eclipse back toward the junkyard. His heart pounded as he landed the ship, its engines sputtering slightly before powering down. "You didn't tell me you were carrying experimental tech," Daryl said, leaning back in his seat. "You did not ask," Eclipse replied. "Fair enough. Revelations in the wreckage." The Krivax cartel wouldn't let this slide. Daryl knew they'd send more ships to investigate the loss of their fighter. If he wanted to survive, the Eclipse needed to be fully operational, and fast. But as he sifted through the ship's data logs, something unexpected caught his attention. Buried deep within its memory banks was a fragment of an encrypted message. "Prototype Alpha 1 must not fall into enemy hands. Its potential consequences are beyond calculation." Daryl frowned. "Eclipse, what were you really designed for?" "The message is incomplete," the AI said. "However, analysis suggests that this vessel's purpose extends beyond conventional combat." Daryl leaned back, staring at the glowing core of the ship. "Well, whatever it is, it's attracting a lot of attention. We'd better be ready for what's coming." The human spirit. Daryl worked tirelessly through the night, repairing what he could and scavenging parts from other wrecks in the junkyard. Rex proved invaluable, hauling components and providing occasional advice in its clunky, monotone voice. As he worked, Eclipse occasionally chimed in with suggestions or critiques. "Structural integrity of that coupling is insufficient," the AI remarked. "You're welcome to fix it yourself," Daryl replied, not looking up. The AI fell silent for a moment before responding. "I lack physical form." Daryl smirked. "Exactly." Despite the back and forth, a bond was forming. Daryl had always believed machines were tools, nothing more. But Eclipse was different, almost like a partner. By dawn, The ship was significantly improved. The engines purred smoothly, the navigation system was nearly operational, and even the experimental weapon was showing signs of stability. "You're shaping up nicely," Daryl said, patting the cockpit. "I am functioning within acceptable parameters," Eclipse replied. Daryl chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." The calm before the storm. As the suns rose over Severick, Daryl climbed onto the ship's hull, gazing at the horizon. The Krivax cartel would come, and when they did, they'd come in force. But he wasn't afraid. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a fighting chance. The Eclipse wasn't just a ship, it was a masterpiece, a relic of forgotten ingenuity brought back to life by human determination. And if the cartel wanted a fight, he'd give them one they'd never forget. The first sign of trouble came as a low rumble in the distance. Daryl Kane, perched atop the Eclipse's hull, scanned the horizon through a pair of battered electrobinoculars. Dust clouds rose in the distance, too deliberate for a sandstorm. "They're coming," he muttered. Inside the ship, Eclipse's AI activated, its calm voice echoing through the cockpit. Multiple vessels detected. 12 atmospheric signatures confirmed, consistent with Krivax cartel skirmisher-class fighters. Daryl sighed, sliding down the ship's side and landing with a thud. "Great." They brought friends. REX, his old loader droid, trundled up beside him. "Perhaps retreat is advisable, sir." Daryl shook his head, a determined grin spreading across his face. "And leave my junkyard to these vultures? Not a chance." Preparing for battle. Daryl sprinted across the junkyard, barking orders to REX as he went. "Get the perimeter defenses online. Activate whatever turrets we've got left. And for the love of all things mechanical, find some cover." The droid whirred in compliance, its spindly arms flailing as it moved. Back at the Eclipse, Daryl climbed into the cockpit and strapped himself in. The ship's controls lit up, and Eclipse's voice greeted him. Defensive systems remain limited. Primary shields are at 28% capacity. Weapon systems are operating at 61% efficiency. "That's better than nothing," Daryl replied, flipping switches and engaging the engines. The thrusters roared to life, the sound reverberating through the junkyard. "Recommend immediate engagement," Eclipse said. "Not yet," Daryl muttered, watching the approaching ships through the viewport. "Let them come to us." The first wave. The Krivax fighters broke through the dust cloud, sleek and menacing as they descended in formation. Plasma cannons flared, sending bolts of energy streaking toward the junkyard. Explosions erupted across the piles of scrap, sending debris flying. "Here we go," Daryl said, gripping the flight stick. The Eclipse lifted off the ground, maneuvering with surprising agility. Daryl dove low, skimming the surface of the junkyard as plasma fire rained down around him. "Engaging kinetic energy feedback array," Eclipse announced. The shimmering energy barrier activated, deflecting incoming plasma bolts and redirecting them back toward the attackers. 2 Krivax fighters exploded in a fiery blaze, their debris scattering across the desert. "Huh. That never gets old," Daryl shouted, pulling the ship into a tight barrel roll. "Efficiency is paramount," Eclipse replied, its tone betraying a hint of satisfaction. The junkyard fights back. Rex had managed to activate a few of the junkyard's aging turrets, and they roared to life, spitting crude but effective volleys of railgun fire. The Krivax ships were fast, but the turret's chaotic aim created a deadly web of projectiles. One fighter clipped a metal beam, spiraling out of control before slamming into a mound of scrap. Another attempted to strafe the Eclipse, but was caught in a crossfire and exploded midair. "We might actually survive this," Daryl muttered, his confidence growing. But then the second wave arrived. The true threat. A shadow fell over the battlefield as a massive Krivax destroyer descended from the sky. Its black hull gleamed menacingly, bristling with weaponry. It hovered ominously, dwarfing the junkyard and casting a long shadow over the Eclipse. "Oh, come on," Daryl groaned. "That's just unfair." "Destroyer-class vessel detected," Eclipse said. "Armament significantly outmatches current capabilities. Tactical retreat is advised." "No way," Daryl snapped, gripping the controls. "We've made it this far. I'm not letting them take this place." The destroyer unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, targeting the Eclipse and the junkyard below. Daryl dodged and weaved, the ship's shield straining under the onslaught. "Shield integrity at 15%, Eclipse warned. "Eclipse, tell me you've got something up your sleeve," Daryl said, desperation creeping into his voice. There was a pause before the AI responded. "Activating experimental core." The Eclipse unleashed. Daryl felt the ship shudder as a deep hum resonated through the cockpit. The lights dimmed momentarily before flaring brighter than ever. Outside, the Eclipse's hull began to glow, energy coursing through its veins like liquid fire. "What's happening?" Daryl shouted. "The experimental core has been engaged," Eclipse replied. "Energy output increased by 300%. This will temporarily override all systems." "Temporarily?" "Prolonged use will result in critical failure." Daryl gritted his teeth. "Then let's make it count." The Eclipse surged forward with unprecedented speed, weaving through the destroyer's defensive fire. The ship's energy barrier pulsed brighter, absorbing and redirecting blasts with devastating precision. Daryl targeted the destroyer's primary weapons array, firing a concentrated burst from the Eclipse's plasma cannons. The blast struck true, igniting a chain reaction that ripped through the destroyer's hull. The massive ship shuddered, smoke and flames pouring from its side. Daryl didn't let up, maneuvering for another attack run. "Critical damage sustained by enemy vessel," Eclipse reported. "Good," Daryl muttered. "Let's finish this." Victory at a cost. The destroyer's engines exploded in a blinding flash, sending shockwaves rippling across the battlefield. The remaining Krivax fighters, seeing their flagship destroyed, retreated into the horizon. Daryl let out a shaky breath, guiding the Eclipse back to the ground. The ship landed heavily, its engines sputtering before falling silent. "Core stability compromised," Eclipse said. "Systems entering emergency shutdown." Daryl climbed out of the cockpit, his legs unsteady. The junkyard was a mess. Flaming wreckage and scattered debris covered the landscape, but it was still standing. "Not bad, huh?" he said, patting the Eclipse's hull. "Acceptable performance," the AI replied, its voice softer than usual. Rex rolled up beside him, its mechanical voice buzzing. "Sir, that was quite the spectacle." Daryl laughed, his exhaustion catching up to him. "Yeah, REX. It sure was." The aftermath. As night fell, Daryl sat atop the Eclipse, staring at the stars. He knew the Krivax cartel wouldn't forget this defeat. They'd come back, and next time, they'd bring even more firepower. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace. The Eclipse, battered but alive, hummed faintly beneath him. Despite its ancient design and countless flaws, it had proven itself to be more than a relic. It was a force to be reckoned with. And so was he. The Eclipse lay dormant in the center of the junkyard, its hull still glowing faintly from the remnants of its last battle. Daryl Kane, bruised and exhausted, sat cross-legged in the cockpit. The soft hum of the ship's systems was the only sound that accompanied his thoughts. "You all right, Eclipse?" he asked, running his hand over the console. "Functional, though several subsystems are nearing critical failure," the AI replied. "A comprehensive overhaul is required to restore optimal performance." Daryl chuckled weakly. "You and me both." The quiet moment was shattered by a warning tone. The diagnostic pad on his lap lit up, displaying a blinking red alert. "Proximity sensors triggered," Eclipse reported. "Multiple vessels entering orbit." Daryl groaned. They didn't waste any time, did they? A reluctant alliance. Before Daryl could climb out of the cockpit, a flicker of movement caught his eye. On the outskirts of the junkyard, a small shuttle descended, kicking up a cloud of dust as it landed. The sleek design and polished exterior were unmistakably alien, nothing like the ragtag vessels of the Krivax cartel. The ramp lowered, revealing a tall, slender figure in flowing metallic robes. The alien skin shimmered with an iridescent sheen, and its large, unblinking eyes locked onto Daryl. "Greetings," it said, its voice melodic yet cold. Daryl raised an eyebrow, keeping his hand near the pistol on his belt. "Who are you?" And what do you want? I am Orith of the Venari, the alien replied, stepping closer. We have monitored your altercation with the Krivax cartel. It appears you have something of great value in your possession. Daryl stiffened. The Eclipse isn't for sale, if that's what you're here for. Orith tilted its head, a faint smile playing on its lips. Not for sale, no. But it is a relic of our design, one we believed lost to time. Its activation has complicated things. Complicated how? The Krivax are merely the first of many. That ship carries technology that could upset the balance of power across the galaxy. Others will come for it, and they will not stop until they have it. Daryl frowned. Let them come. We'll handle it. Oritha's expression hardened. Not alone, you won't. The Venari have no choice but to intervene. That ship is a beacon, and we must ensure it does not fall into the wrong hands. Great, Daryl muttered. Now I've got intergalactic babysitters. The final wave. The conversation was cut short by the unmistakable sound of engines roaring overhead. Daryl and Orith looked up to see a fleet of Krivax ships descending, led by a massive battleship that made the destroyer from the previous fight look like a toy. Lovely, Daryl said, sprinting back to the Eclipse. Orith followed, their tone urgent. You cannot hope to defeat them alone. Daryl paused at the cockpit door, glancing back. Then help me. The alien hesitated before nodding. Very well. But if we do this, we do it my way. Unleashing the Eclipse's true power. Inside the Eclipse, Daryl and Orith worked side by side, their hands flying over the controls. Oritha's intimate knowledge of the ship's design allowed them to unlock hidden systems and bypass ancient restrictions. The experimental core can be pushed beyond its current limits, Orith said, inputting a sequence of commands. But doing so will require a pilot capable of withstanding the neural feedback. Daryl's grip on the controls tightened. That's me, isn't it? You are uniquely attuned to the ship, Orith replied. But it will not be easy. Easy stopped being an option a long time ago. The cockpit lights dimmed as the Eclipse powered up. Energy crackled along its hull, and the ship's sleek design began to shift, plates reconfiguring and weapons emerging from hidden compartments. Whoa, Daryl breathed. You've been holding out on me, Eclipse. All systems operational, the AI said, its voice steadier than ever. The battle for the Eclipse. The Krivax fleet opened fire as the Eclipse launched into the sky, dodging and weaving through the onslaught. Plasma bolts streaked past, lighting up the desert night. Daryl gritted his teeth, his mind synchronized with the ship's systems. Every move felt instinctive, as if the Eclipse were an extension of his own body. Focus your fire on the battleship, Orith instructed from the co-pilot seat. On it, Daryl replied, diving toward the massive vessel. The Eclipse's newly activated weapons roared to life, unleashing a barrage of plasma beams and kinetic projectiles. The battleship's shields flared brightly, struggling to absorb the onslaught. Shield integrity at 72%, Eclipse reported. Not good enough, Daryl muttered. Orith, what else have you got? The alien input another sequence, and a new weapon system activated. A glowing orb of energy formed at the ship's nose, pulsing with raw power. Target the reactor core, Orith said. Daryl nodded, lining up the shot. Here goes nothing. The energy orb launched, streaking toward the battleship. It struck the reactor core dead-on, triggering a massive explosion that engulfed the vessel in a blinding flash. The aftermath. As the remaining Krivax ships retreated, Daryl guided the Eclipse back to the ground. The ship landed smoothly, its hull still glowing faintly from the battle. Orith stepped out of the cockpit, surveying the wreckage. You have proven yourself, human. But this is only the beginning. Daryl leaned against the ship, exhaustion etched into his face. What now? The galaxy will come for this ship, and for you, Orith said. The Venari will do what we can to protect you, but the Eclipse is no longer a secret. Its power will draw enemies from every corner of the stars. Daryl smirked, patting the hull. Let them come. We'll be ready. A legend reborn. As Oritha's shuttle lifted off, Daryl stood alone in the junkyard, the Eclipse gleaming behind him. He knew his life would never be the same. The ship, once discarded as worthless, had become a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope in a galaxy on the brink of chaos. And Daryl Kane, a simple mechanic from a forgotten world, had risen to become its unlikely guardian.